All right, guys, another video. We're basically going to title it right now From the Coach's Desk until we think of something cooler. I know
It's pretty cool, though.
it's pretty cool. We've been sending out emails whenever something kind of comes up in the gym and there's either a gross misunderstanding or a new concept we want to explain to athletes. We usually send out an email, or Jordan does, I should say, and it goes pretty deep into the rabbit hole of our purpose and what we're trying to accomplish. And we usually title those emails From the Coach's Desk to give our athletes an inside perspective on what we're trying to accomplish. Usually on their end, they just see what they're doing that day. They don't understand the bigger picture and what we're trying to accomplish with the program. But the last video we just did, something kind of popped up, and I want to talk about it. And that's that idea that intensity dictates the type of adaptation and volume dictates how much. And if you have any experience in strength and conditioning, you can pretty much say that volume and intensity are the two biggest variables, or the primary two variables that you will manipulate to create fitness, regardless of what you're trying to accomplish. Doesn't matter if you're a power lifter, if you're a military athlete, if you're an endurance athlete, if you're a combative athlete, MMA, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, whatever it may be. But this concept is lost on a lot of people, I would say. And so what I kind of want to do is let's explain this concept that intensity, right, which can be load, speed, pace, whatever it may be, dictates what your body or how your body is going to react to that stimulus. And then volume, right, which is basically your miles, your reps, your training frequency, whatever it may be, is going to dictate how much of that adaptation.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of really kind of beautiful things wrapped up in this simple idea that intensity determines how much, what type of adaptation you get, and volume determines how much of that adaptation you get. If we think about what we can do with our bodies as a matchbook, the volume that you do, again, volume being the duration of training in a single bout, the frequency of training, or the number of reps that you're doing, that is building the number of matches in your matchbook. The more matches you have, the better chance you have in a competition setting of outlasting your competitors. On the intensity side, intensity determines essentially how hot those matches will burn. The hotter the match starts out burning, then the more burst you're going to get out of it, the more separation you're going to get from your fellow competitors. And that may be the separation of 1% or 3%. But the higher level you get, the more and more those margins start to diverge you from your peers. And so whenever we think about how we must manipulate volume and intensity to get the most out of our athleticism, we can kind of very easily sum up the idea that volume is going to build the number of matches in my matchbook, and then intensity is going to determine how hot those matches burn. And in both ways, I am allowing myself to gain a margin over my peers by having more matches available and by getting more out of matches whenever I choose to burn them in the competitive setting.
Yeah, and to kind of put that into a simple example, because we can talk about this in depth, and when we have these terms, some people are kind of a little confused by it. But an example of intensity, for example, would be, let's say, sprinting versus long, slow distance. Okay, a 100-meter sprint, all right, obviously is done at a completely different intensity than a 30-minute slow run. So just simply how hard you're running is going to create different adaptations in the body.
Yes, it is.
Okay, sprinting, we're going to train the creatine phosphate energy system. You're doing that long, slow distance, 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever it may be, your aerobic energy system. So very different adaptations are happening. Same exercise, you're still running, but you're running hard or you're running easy. So that intensity dictates what kind of adaptation. Now, if we look at the volume side of things, you could say athlete A, he's going to run, let's just say 1.5 miles. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Cumulative weekly volume, 4.5 miles. And let's just say he's running slow, easy. He's training his aerobic energy system. Compare that to athlete B, who's going to run 3 miles Monday, 3 miles Tuesday, 3 miles Thursday, 3 miles Friday, right? Now he's got a weekly cumulative volume of 12 miles. That is almost 3 times the training volume. Although they're doing the same activity, the same intensity, volume is going to give athlete B a much better adaptation. He's going to become a more fit athlete over time because that volume is going to determine how much adaptation he gets.
Yep.
So a couple things that factor volume. Obviously, you can do miles, time. You can do meters if you're on a rower or indoor bike. On the gym side of things, how many reps, how many sets, how many different exercises you're doing per muscle group, as well as training frequency. How many days a week are you going to do that? All those things influence your weekly volume.
So I think a big question that comes from this is, well, why would I train at different intensities? If I know that I'm going to train at a high intensity, for example, and get a neuromuscular benefit, or if I train at a middle intensity, I'm going to get a hypertrophy benefit, then why would I ever train at a lower intensity? Or on the endurance side, if I were going to train at low intensity, why would, then I know that I'm going to be able to run longer, but what if I want to run faster? What if I want to look like the way that a sprinter looks? Why would I ever run at the lower intensity?
Well, that volume is going to essentially, a lower intensity allows you to have more training volume. The more training volume you have, what that means is that now your body can tolerate more training stress. So when you go, like let's just say we go back to that sprinting analogy, and if you don't run at all and all you do is kind of sprint, you're doing maybe 10 100-meter sprints, it's only 1,000 meters of sprinting. If you go into a training phase that is focused on speed and you have done lots of long, slow distance work, and maybe you're just doing like 1 day a week kind of speed session, right? You're accumulating all this training volume, which is going to make the connective tissues, the joints, the muscles, they're much more prepared and ready to tolerate higher training stresses than they would if you just jumped right into that high intensity work. Same thing with the powerlifting side, right?
Yep.
Accumulation phases like in the Raider cycle, those first couple blocks, they're always much lower intensity, much higher training volume, right? Getting the body ready, the joints, the muscle tissues, the connective tissues for that higher intensity it's coming.
So essentially, we can say that training at different intensities builds adaptations that are unique to that intensity window. If we were to define intensity windows broadly, right, it doesn't have to be like, okay, I have to be exactly at 30%. It could be 30 to 50, right? And then like 50 to 65, 65 to 75, 75 to 85, or 75 to 100%, right? We could work within these windows, but in each of these windows, we experience a certain type of adaptation because of the intensity. Going back to our primary rule of intensity determining the type of adaptation that we get. And so we train in different intensities to gain the benefits of specific adaptations. And those specific adaptations allow us to get better quality of training when we shift into higher intensity, because the volume has inoculated our body to fatigue, and so now we can continually increase our intensity without the fear of becoming too tired to achieve that higher and harder intensity, thereby pushing up our ability to increase our intensity over time.
Yep. Especially because when you do high intensity things, you want good form. You want good technique.
It's so important.
You need good mechanics. You don't want to have sloppy speed work, right? Because you didn't do any base training, you didn't do any long, slow distance work, and you go out and your sprint mechanics go to shit halfway through your speed session.
It's almost like low intensity stuff or that build phase. It's literally doing that. It's building an infrastructure. Right. It's making the cells more efficient at metabolizing fat, whatever, sugar, basically creating energy, and then as we gain that efficiency, but we're also gaining a lot of biomechanical efficiency like Jake was talking about. I mean, the ability of your muscles to stretch and rebound, right? That stretch shortening cycle, along with your tendons, and in the impact that your bones and your joints can handle. All of these things are built through those low intensity, high volume periods of our training, and they lend themselves to better high intensity periods of our training because we're building that infrastructure.
So the takeaway, volume and intensity, the two biggest variables you can manipulate in any training program. Doesn't matter the exercise, doesn't matter front squat, back squat, sled push, tired, whatever. Those things are kind of irrelevant. Volume and intensity are what you need to manipulate as you move through a training program. Keep in mind, intensity is going to dictate the type of adaptation, and volume is going to dictate how much.